You know that feeling? Picture this: a quiet terrace, an overcast sky, and two colleagues, Mira and Arav, just sitting down with a thermos of warm water. The air feels heavy. And then Mira says something that I think absolutely every single one of us has felt at some point in our careers. She says, "I've been feeling stretched, not just tired, like I'm being pulled in too many directions." Man, that right there, that is the very real, very heavy feeling of workplace overwhelm. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack exactly what Mira's feeling. Today, we are exploring the human architecture of stress, conflict, and justice. We'll be looking at how your individual strain, interpersonal friction, and systemic fairness all come together to build your fundamental experience at work. It's a truly fascinating framework drawn from Mira and Arav's Terrace Reflections, and I am so thrilled to guide you through it. Okay, let's look at our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the anatomy of work stress, then look at coping and interventions, understand the dynamics of conflict, and discuss how to actually resolve that conflict. After that, we'll explore the three pillars of justice, and we'll wrap up with why justice is a daily choice. Let's dive right into Section 1, the anatomy of work stress. This is all about the individual experience. Now, Arav defines stress in a very specific way. He says it's the physical and emotional strain that arises when job demands literally exceed a person's capacity to cope. Notice that it isn't just about having a heavy workload. It's really about a lack of control, clarity, support, and meaning. And Mira adds another crucial layer to this. She says stress can be totally silent. It doesn't always look like panic or tears at your desk. Sometimes, it is simply a slow erosion of joy. So, what actually causes this erosion? Well, the major culprits range from role ambiguity and role conflict to work overload, lack of autonomy, poor relationships, and organizational change. Let's ground this with a real example. Mira shared this story about an internship where she was handed tasks with absolutely zero context. She didn't know who to report to, what the metrics for success even looked like, or how to ask for help. That is classic role ambiguity, and let me tell you, it causes severe silent stress. And the consequences of this? They ripple outward. You start with physical symptoms, right? Fatigue, headaches, maybe insomnia. Then the emotional symptoms hit like a ton of bricks: anxiety, irritability, maybe even depression. And finally, you start seeing behavioral symptoms like absenteeism or total withdrawal. The absolutely crucial point here, as Mira observed, is that stress doesn't just hurt the individual. It actively degrades the team dynamics, the organizational culture, and your overall outcomes. Which brings us to Section 2, coping and interventions. How do we combat this slow erosion? So there are basically two main healthy ways we can cope on an individual level. First up is problem-focused coping. This is where you tackle the source of the stress head-on. The other is emotion-focused coping, which is all about managing how you emotionally react to that stressor. Now, Arav admitted he used to rely on something called avoidance coping, basically just ignoring the stressor and pretending everything was fine. Spoiler alert, that only made it build up worse over time. Mira, on the other hand, uses emotion-focused coping beautifully. She journals. It helps her actively name her feelings and actually process them, rather than just running away. But listen, coping isn't just a you problem. Organizations have to step up too. They need to do this through clear communication to kill that awful role ambiguity we talked about, plus supportive leadership, flexible policies, and wellness programs. Arav makes a really important note here. He says managers need to genuinely notice people, not just their performance. A truly supportive leader sees the human being behind the output. All right, let's zoom out a bit for Section 3, the dynamics of workplace conflict. What happens when stressed individuals clash? So, organizational conflict is defined as a disagreement between individuals or groups due to differences in goals, values, or perceptions. But here is the really interesting thing for Mira and Arav's notes. Conflict is not inherently bad. No way. If it's managed well, it can actually spark growth, drive innovation, and provide some much-needed clarity for a team. But why does it flare up in the first place? Well, it usually stems from poor communication, scarce resources, personality differences, and structural factors. Mira had such a brilliant observation here. She says, conflict often ferments in silence. It literally breeds in what is left unsaid. Arav backed this up with a super relatable college memory where two groups fiercely battled over scarce budget resources. The conflict wasn't about malice or people being mean. It was simply structural competition over something scarce. Okay, moving right along to Section 4, strategies for resolving conflict. How do we navigate these disagreements? So, a lot of us think of compromise as the absolute gold standard of conflict resolution, right? But there is a massive distinction to make here. In a compromise, each party gives something up. But in collaboration, you find a win-win solution. As Mira and Arav realized, compromise is definitely the quicker route, but it sometimes leaves wounds because everyone walks away losing just a little bit. Collaboration, well, that takes time. It's really hard work, but it builds deep, lasting trust. And to reach that level of collaboration, managers play a vital role. But get this, they don't have to forcefully solve every single dispute. That's a myth. Instead, they just need to hold the space for dialogue. They need to listen without judgment, clarify roles, and encourage empathy. They need to be facilitators of trust, not just fixers of problems. Now let's zoom out one final time to Section 5, the 3 pillars of justice, the bedrock of the workplace ecosystem. Organizational justice is simply the perception of fairness in the workplace. Amira points out something that completely shifts how we should look at this. She says justice isn't just about following the rules or checking off some HR compliance list. It's fundamentally about relationships. It is the absolute foundation of psychological safety. So how does fairness actually work in practice? It rests on 3 pillars. First, distributive justice. This is about fairness in outcomes, like your pay or promotions. If you do amazing work but get passed over for the promotion, that feels distributively unjust. Second is procedural justice, which is the fairness of the processes. Arav remembered this one selection process with totally unclear criteria. Even if the best person was chosen, the whole process felt completely unfair. And third, interactional justice. This is fairness in treatment. Miro pointed out that even if an outcome is 100% fair, if the communication surrounding it is rude or dismissive, it still feels unjust. All 3 of these pillars must be standing for a workplace to feel truly fair. Fostering this kind of justice requires transparent policies, inclusive processes, and deeply respectful interactions. And why does this matter? Well, it's huge. A culture of fairness directly impacts morale, commitment, and retention. When people feel protected by justice, they feel psychologically safe. And when they feel safe, they speak up, they take creative risks, and they really grow. Let's bring it all home with Section 6, justice is a daily choice. This is a really powerful realization. Back on the terrace, the air has cleared a bit, and Mira says something incredible. Stress and conflict are part of life, but justice is a choice. Just let that sink in for a second. We cannot eliminate stress or conflict entirely, it's just human nature. But fairness? Fairness is an active, conscious decision. Arav followed this up by noting that good managers must choose fairness daily in how they speak, how they decide, and how they care for their teams. As Mira and Arav finally closed their notebook, they left themselves and us with a few reflective questions. I want you to engage in a quick self-audit right now. First question, what stresses me? Are you dealing with role ambiguity right now? Work overload? Try to just name it, exactly like Mira does in her journal. Second question, how do I respond to conflict? Be brutally honest with yourself here. Do you default to avoidance, just hoping the problem magically goes away? Do you settle for quick compromises that leave lasting wounds? Or do you put in the hard work for true collaboration? And finally, the most provocative question of all to leave you with. How do I create justice around me? Because look, whether you are a manager, a team member, or an intern on day one, you have the power to influence interactional justice every single day, simply through respect and empathy. Justice isn't just a checklist, guys. It's a culture we build together. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it helps you navigate your own workplace architecture with a little more clarity and a whole lot more fairness. See you next time.